Hey everybody, as usual, I forgot to add myself to the stage. So I did say hello to you all. Hey Temper, hey, here for the tea, here for the show. Dark Matter, hey Nick, hey Control, and anybody up top that I missed. But yeah, why do I want to do this? I'm a great hacker, am I? I forget to add myself to the stage. There is a few things I want to kind of bring awareness to, for the lack of a better term. I want to bring awareness to a couple of things that are historical, faction, factual, and on some things that may not be known by a lot of people. So it does have to do with Irish history. It does have to do with a crossover from how the Black Panthers and the civil rights movement in America directly affected this country, its political movement, even down to our proclamation, Declaration of Proclamation, as well as the Good Friday Agreement, which was an essential part of the peace process up north. There were advocates such as Bernadette Devlin, who was a key person involved in advocating and understanding both sides of the movements, the seven movements. For people that are not aware, Ireland was oppressed for a long, long time and under colonial rule of Britain. The whole country was invaded. I'm not getting into the ins and outs of that, but I just really want to focus on some points. One of those being, if you were Catholic, the eventual focus kind of went up north within 6 counties. Today, that's still there, it's still prevalent. As I've explained before, there's literally a wall that's built to separate the Catholics from the Protestants. But at one time, the Catholics were targeted in their own country. British rule was in Ireland. We were not a republic as such yet, and we would have suffered a lot of similar injustices that the Black civil rights movement would have. So I just want to give you a couple of the ties between the Black American civil rights struggle and the Irish activist span. It was over 2 centuries long, and it was rooted in 19th century abolition alliances and the 1960s civil rights movement. And the Abolition Alliance was where the president came out and spoke up against what was happening to the African Americans and down south. So their tactics were non-violent and direct action, marches, sit-ins, protests, and based against systematic inequality. Frederick Douglass toured this country, forging a lasting bond with the Irish liberator Daniel O'Connell, who was prevalent in Irish history here, and was a huge part in the uprising within the country. He strongly condemned American slavery. The IRA here directly modeled their campaign on the American Deep South. They sang the gospel anthem, "We Shall Overcome." They did a march in 1969 from Belfast to Derry, singing the gospel anthem, "We Shall Overcome." That was inspired from what they had seen from the civil rights movement over in America. Even down to how the Black Panthers had dressed was highly influential to the IRA at the time in 1970. They adapted it. They adapted their ideology. They literally saw similarities in oppression, ideology, being discriminated against. It was a complete different time in this country. Really different. You were a second citizen if you were Catholic. You were punished. You weren't allowed to speak your own language. People got punished if they spoke in Irish. Anything that was related to your identity or your culture was stripped and removed away. So a lot of people then during the famine would have went over to America. That in itself, I know people have brought up on YouTube here previously about how I reacted to somebody who brought up a famine. There is a misunderstanding in relation to the famine in Ireland. It was a genocide, not a famine. It was a genocide and not a famine. Crops in Ireland were poisoned to be able to remove Irish people from their homes. Their land was taken. People who weren't working were basically, it was a very difficult time. You have families over here who say had 7 sons. Somebody recently made a statement that I was in the IRA, which is ridiculous. But let me just explain something here. There's not many people in this country that does not have ties from generations back. Because if you go back generations, everybody in this country was fighting against it. Was fighting against colonialism, imperialism, fighting for their rights, human rights. Fighting not to be starved. So the famine was an absolute attempt at just wiping out Catholics. Religion. This is what this comes down to. Religion. It's crazy when you think about it in today's terms. So yeah, as I said, they directly modeled their campaigns on the American Deep South, singing the gospel song. There was global solidarity. Irish leaders like Bernadette Devlin, this woman was responsible for giving the key in New York to the Black Panthers. It was 1969. I'll get to date down in a second. Bernadette Devlin met Angela Davis. As a result of that meeting and Martin Luther King Jr.'s teachings and speaking directly influenced the political leaders up in the north of Ireland to come with a Good Friday Agreement, which allowed political prisoners to be released and absolved. Many of them have been in prison a long, long time. Some of them literally went on hunger strike and died for a cause to just be able to live in their own country, under their own religion, and as a fight back against colonialism. They were labeled as terrorists. There is a historical transitional tactic exchange, and it's called the black and green dynamics. So this would have been on contemporary social justice. And this is what Ireland kind of admired. Bobby Sands, exactly watchers, yeah, only one of them. But that came later. There was a connection to civil rights and discrimination in America, especially with Northern Ireland. Let me load this up. There's an article, I'm going to put it in the link. Let me put the link into the chat, and I'll put it on my community wall. There was a person that done an interview in the Irish Journal of American Studies who had an early interest in American history, originated on what they now realise was a woeful, incorrect, naive impression that unlike Northern Ireland, America's past was uncontested. In their teens, they read To Kill a Mockingbird and watched movies like Mississippi Burning and became fascinated by and in awe of how African Americans had risen up and finally defeated racism and where am I going? Sorry. Culmination of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. The life experience did not disabuse of this notion, nor did the school education. And that's very common here too. We don't get Irish history in our school. A lot of the generations now are unfamiliar with what would have happened during those decades. We get a British version. We don't get told how Cromwell came over here and sent the Irish to the Caribbean. We don't get told about the old no dogs, no blacks, no Irish that were prevalent throughout here and including in England. That's not taught here. Complete culture stripped, a history rewritten, the rights of a human stripped because of religion, because of their beliefs. This person that does the article grew up post Good Friday Agreement. That means the ceasefire existed. No more war up north, no more bombing, we'll say. The tensions are still the same today. They really are, they're quite high. You go into one side of the north and you will see UK flags everywhere. Ulster Unionist flags. You go to the other side of the street maybe, and then you will see all the Republican flags. Both have different governments. Both belong to different countries. Both have different currencies. Although it's categorized as one and the same. And that's a misconception that's really, really common. The agreement in Northern Ireland became just as the United States elected their first black president. America was now divorced from its history, while at home, the construction of the new peace walls, along with the reinforcement of those erected during the conflict, signified that the only thing that they had succeeded with divorce from each other Sorry, 1 second. I have my wrong glasses on. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay. They were erected during the conflict, signified that the only thing that they had been successfully divorced from was each other. And at the time of the second start to Obama, he had just been elected for a second term. Well, they had spent their last 3 years at school studying Irish history from the 1800s onwards, as well as whole life listening to the arguments over what had happened on this island. Since then, there was a study in America where he learned about 1920s and the resurgence of the KKK, plus that was in the distant past, relegated to the time before Martin Luther King and the March on Washington. In contrast, the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland seemed a lot messier, and given that it preceded a 30-year period of quasi-civil war, successful, it goes without saying, they do have their similarities. They really do. When I say that they actually adapted the ideology, that's exactly what they did. The IRA I'm talking about, directly from the Black Panthers. There are people who were imprisoned. Like one person, actually, I'll bring it up. There was one person that was imprisoned with somebody for a long time, and they hadn't saw each other. And only recently, it was documented. Let me get it here. In regards to this woman, Bernadette Devlin, she visited the United States. She famously handed the key in New York City over to Harlem. There was a chapter in the Black Panthers declaring that both causes were the part of the same global structure against oppression. The visual influence the Black Panthers had on the Irish Republican groups, there were specific socialist philosophies that connected the two movements. There was tactics within the RUC, or the British Army, that compared to the experiences of the Blacks in the US police and how they were treated. Just let me show you. There were Catholics dragged from their home. There were documented, there was children shot on their way to school for being Catholic. Shot, dead. I'm not saying there weren't atrocities on both sides. I'm saying, literally, this is Irish history. Pictures like this are not really uncommon. Genocide temper, exactly. If you were Catholic, you were a target. You were seen less than, and you were treated as such. Children included. So the Black Panther Party and the radical Irish Republican groups, specifically the official IRA, who later was the Irish National Liberation Army, they're very different, okay? They differed on ideology. They rejected narrow nationalism in the favor of Marxist-Leninist ideology, which is anti-imperialism, to keep it simple for you all. Both movements framed their struggles as anti-colonial. The Panthers viewed Black communities inside the US as an internal colony and exploited by white capitalism, while Irish socialists viewed Northern Ireland as a colony occupied by British imperialism. There were similarities. I by no means mean to minimize or to disrespect anyone from the African community in what I'm talking about. I'm literally speaking about the historical documentation in this country, which relates to the movement and the direct impact it had on this country today and how it changed things. I'm not saying everything was completely similar. I am saying that there were similarities. Class solidarity over race and religion. The Panthers broke away from cultural nationalism to form alliances with poor white Latino and Cuba, while Irish socialists viewed Northern Ireland as a colony occupied by British imperialism. They broke away from nationalism to form alliances. And similarly, the Irish Socialist Republicans argued that working class Protestants and Catholics were both victims of capitalized division and needed to unite against the ruling class. That is the argument you kind of see today. And what's up the north? You've got the wall in Belfast. They're both victims of colonialism. They are both victims on both sides. And that's where I'll argue where it differs. Okay? It is different in that way, but I do want to show how this ideology completely impacted in Ireland, how it is possible that somebody in Ireland could be an advocate based on a similarity they see and what is within their culture, and therefore be an ally, not a foe. By no means I'm sitting here trying to explain anybody's lived experience. That's not what I'm trying to do. I am literally trying to point to the similarities not the differences, not the division. The Irishman said. What a time to be alive, Temper. Both groups believed that socialism must be practical. The Panthers did a free breakfast for children programs and community medical clinics, whereas in Northern Ireland we adapted very similar too. Both groups believed they literally went and done an identical thing up the north. They adapted pretty much everything and made it culturally over here. Over here, they made people's taxis. Okay, so people that were Catholic, co-op shops, and community defence committees to bypass state infrastructure. This is where the political part comes in. You had high censorship from the politicals here. The media did not want to cover it. There were internal splits faced between purely military action and socialist political organising. And the social ideas, they were expressed in manifestos and newspapers. So that's another similarity that the Black Panthers had, as well as the Irish IRA. Both parties relied heavily on manifestos, which meant underground newspapers. Some similarities, yeah, here for the show. Yeah, so underground newspapers, okay, bypass mainstream media. There was high censorship. Educate the working class and align their local struggles with the global revolution. Global. The manifesto, published in 1966, the 10-point program, served as the party's ideological foundation, blended basic civil rights with socialist demands, famously calling for full employment, descent, housing, and an end to the capitalist robbery of the Black community, the freedom of all Black prisoners jailed in an unjust system. It reached a peak in circulation of over 250,000 copies in the late 1960s, edited by Eldridge Cleaver. And its Marxist theory with revolutionary artwork and Emory Douglas framing local police brutality as part of the same capitalist imperialist system fighting Viet Cong in Vietnam. Hey, Plotter. Again, very similar to what was going on up north. There were people over the years, let me give you an example. We've had many people in Ireland, especially from up north. There's the Guildford 4, there's the Birmingham 6. There's a lot of people. I don't know if anyone has seen the movie In the Name of the Father. And that was based on Jerry Conlon, who was falsely imprisoned simply because he was in London. And that bomb had gone off, and his only crime was being Irish and being from the north. He spent many years in prison. His father left Belfast to go see him. And when he arrived in London, he was arrested. At that time, you had to tell people if you were leaving the country. The British Army were informed. When he got there, he was going to get a solicitor for his son to help him. He also got arrested. And there was evidence that was faked. And those two, as well as other people, got sent to prison for a long time. I think it was 12 years Jerry done. Giuseppe died in prison. They had done nothing wrong. And as I said, their only crime being Catholic and Irish. I'm not diminishing the impact that any innocent person on either side received. I'm not. I'm only trying to show the systematic damage that was caused. His father died in a British prison. Yeah, and there are other cases also where people were framed, sent to prison unjustly. In the case of the Guildford Four, many, many years later, it was reopened under an appeal, and it showed that Jerry's statement at the time was that he was with a homeless man, and that homeless man carved his name into the back of a bench. And because they wanted to find people guilty or make an example and say, we have the culprits, they got lined up. On appeal, that was found. And their alibi checked out. And it got turned, and the verdict got turned over. But a man lost his life in prison unjustly. And his only crime being Catholic and Irish. Again, down to the civil rights of a person. Socialist Republicans here, they anchored their ideology. So the proclamation of 1916, I think a lot of households here in Ireland have that. It's kind of like where the Republic was born. It was written by James Connolly. And it's the right of the people in Ireland to the ownership of Ireland. And again, this was heavily influenced by the movement in America. The paper heavily emphasized class warfare. Catholics were Catholics were deemed second class. They were not entitled to the same things. They were dragged from their homes. They were shot going to school. The most horrendous, horrific things. Starved. They relied heavily on class warfare, trade unionism, and anti-imperialism. They were encouraging Catholics and Protestant workers to unite against imperialism in general. That spent many decades spinning out here. And to be honest, it didn't work. Because to this day, those tensions are still there. They're still there. I was speaking to somebody earlier and saying, I went to a concert in Belfast. Here's the little nuances, I suppose. We were coming out of a concert in Belfast and we were driving home. And we're going on Google Maps. Google Maps brought us to a loyalist area. Okay, this is even after the Good Friday Agreement and the ceasefire. Okay, so it's only about 4 years ago. We drove into a loyalist area. There were flags, UDA flags. There were the Red Hand of Ulster. There were the UK flags everywhere. When I tell you, we felt so intimidated. It was crazy. They were the longest, maybe 20 minutes to get back out on the street where we felt safe. Now, the difference is you stand out like a sore thumb up the north because you have Republican plates. And up north, they're all yellow. We've often gone up, it's really intimidating. Yeah, the tensions are so high even still. I'm not saying this against any particular person, maybe from the north or anything. I'm just saying in general, that's what's there. That's the history. Very politically, heavily prevalent to today. We got through it. There were a couple of people shouting at us. There were people that would stop and kind of stare and go, what are you doing here? So all of that is still very, very real. Exactly. Plotter, avoid, shank, kill. And do not listen to Google Maps. Find your route that you're familiar with. It was really, we were praying to get out of there. Honestly, that's how charged politically it was. Irish face systematic and institutional discrimination in employment and housing. Exactly, until the 80s, yeah. Which is not that long ago. Not that long ago. And even for the people up north who are Catholic today, they're still fighting, say, for a place in government with the UK, to be heard, to have their viewpoints considered. We did have somebody who went on hunger strike during the 80s in H Block, which is notorious. These people got labelled as, they were prisoners of war. They were defending their country. They were defending their land, their homes, their children, their family. They went on hunger strike and died. But Bobby Sands actually made it as an MP, which is a politician over in UK government. Because he was in H Block, he died. He died for a cause. And he died through that hunger strike. Have we progressed? I don't think we've progressed a whole lot in that regard. I think that the best that we can hope for is kind of how it is now. You've got the there's no hard border. That was another thing Ireland had. If you went past a certain part, it was heavily guarded by UK police. UK police. You had to basically, you could be pulled over. Well, you would be pulled over and asked where you're going. All of that stuff. It was a hard border, which was something that the UK kept fighting for when they were leaving the EU. They wanted a hard border, but Ireland insisted no, and there is none today. Okay, let me get to this lady. Here's a picture of a woman in the IRA, 1970s. Very common, extremely common. Aesthetically, now you might look at that and go, that was quite common. The women would go out with dustbins and bang them on the ground to be able to alert other neighbours that the UK police were coming around, the military. Or if somebody was about, and their houses were raided. If you were suspected as being in the IRA, your whole family could get turned upside down. Absolutely, EJ. One of the most horrific things that ever happened here in Ireland. One of them, yeah. Okay, so there's an idea. This is Black Panthers. You can actually see with the pictures from the IRA how they dressed, being heavily influenced, even down to the berets and the jackets. Very similar. Black and then green. That's the only difference. Okay, so let me get to Angela Davis. There is an article by Roisin Spinallon, an Irish name. And she did an article on when Angela Davis met Bernadette Devlin. Bernadette Devlin is paramount in the way things sit today, and I'll get to her now in a second, but this article kind of explains in layman's terms the process that happened. So it says the abolitionists of Britain, we often see America specifically, the Black radical tradition in American as the home of abolition. This is for good reason. But revolutionaries such as W.E.B. Du Bois, George Jackson, and Angela Davis, Black Americans have been pioneering abolition for centuries. However, an abolitionist tradition is much closer than many of us realize. If we only look at the north of Ireland, are occupied in 6 countries, we would find a long popular struggle against the oppressive forces of prisons and policing. Policing in Ireland was a colonial invention to suppress anti-British dissent, and it had functioned that way ever since. After the partitions in Ireland in 1920, Irish Catholics in the north of Ireland faced brutal and unrelenting state violence for their very existence. Gerrymandered into squalid ghettos, terrorized by police, and segregated from society. Any attempt to agitate for basic civil rights was ruthlessly suppressed by the state. This is what I mean about the similarities. It was called from the persecuted Catholic community for defiance against violent state forces that reviewed the previously dormant Irish Republican Army. When Bombay Street, a Catholic area in Belfast, was burned out by loyalist gangs with police aid, with UK aid, military aid in 1969, killing 5 and leaving many families homeless. The demand for resistance became widespread. In an environment where police murder and violence were an everyday occurrence, it was no surprise that Catholic communities became de facto abolitionists. The British reaction to this increasing resistance and the IRA popularity was Operation Demetrius. Internment went out the British Army with the help of local police force known as the RUC. They stormed Catholic communities, arresting, incarcerating, and torturing people in the Long Kesh internment camps, with hundreds imprisoned and 7,000 people made refugees in their own country. The true function of policing and prison was indisputable within Irish communities, Catholic communities. It was all in this environment for severe police that the Catholic of the Derry began to riot, resist, and defy the state. After residents of the Bogside area revolted against the police forces in the Battle of the Bogside, they declared it an autonomous zone. People erected blockades to prevent police entering. Radio Free Derry. It's to this day called London Derry by anybody Protestant, or the UK. We call it Derry. It broadcasted rebel songs and called for resistance. You are now entering Free Derry. That is on the it's on the end of it's actually on the side wall of a house. When you come into Derry, you are now entering Free Derry. To this day, it's there in the house. And there are many murals that were made. Yeah, the murals are fantastic. Some of them on both sides, actually. On both sides, they made murals in remembrance. It's something you really need to look to be able to understand. But they made rebel songs for resistance, and they now put up you are entering Free Derry, painted on a corner house, signifying the police. It is now an infamous slogan adopted world over, from Palestine to the Basque Country, lasting intermittently for 3 years. 3 years. That's all. Free Derry shows the power of a community united against policing. It's a symbol of revolution. The season of the streets of an oppressed people. Free Derry is abolition. In the same environment, severe police violence of the Catholics of Derry began to riot, resist and defy the state after residents of the Bogside area revolted against forces in the Battle of the Bogside area. They declared an autonomous zone. Irishman singing up the rock. There's a picture on this too. I'll put all this on my community wall for anybody that might be interested in it. One resident of the Free Derry was Bernadette Devlin, a strong-willed, working-class woman whose straight talking made her a natural advocate for people. Elected as an MP at only age 21. She was elected as an MP and was an activist for civil rights of all people. She is well known for slapping, she actually slapped a Tory MP in Parliament. She actually went up and slapped him. And as a leading voice in the fight to abolish the barbaric H blocks, that's the one I was talking about earlier, where people who were prisoners of war were labelled terrorists and held in H block, exactly where the hunger strikes took place. She got a 4-month prison sentence for riotous behaviour. She gave an insightful interview on the oppressive function of the law, typifying abolitionist views on the criminal justice system. Her quote, one of her quotes were, "When we break the law, we go to jail. When the government breaks the law, the government makes new laws." Bernadette Devlin would later become friends with the revolutionary abolitionist Angela Davis. This is her here on the screen. Devlin visited Davis in prison in 1971. In future, Davis will be a leading voice in the struggle to free Bernadette Devlin's daughter, Roisin McCalskey. She was involved in a plan to bring her from prison. She condemned McCalskey's imprisonment, the terrible treatment of Roisin McCalskey by her British captors. Roisin must be freed and Northern Ireland released from the shackles of British imperialism. She's basically fighting for a person's rights, for them standing up for themselves, and in turn being imprisoned. Bernadette herself went on tour around America to raise funds for refugees and political prisoners in Ireland. Irish people, refugees, in camps in their own country. Their crime, they're Catholic. Only to be faced with the violent racism of Irish American assimilationists. Despite these crowds sending millions of dollars to support Irish Republican prisoners back home, many were agents of the same oppressive policing system that tyrannizes marginalized communities in America. Devlin was known to scold these crowds, meeting instead with the Young Lords and the Black Panthers. She famously giving the Freedom Key to New York that she had never been awarded by the city's mayor. That she had been awarded by the city's mayor, she gave it to them. The Black Panthers themselves reported on the situation in the 6 counties. They published an article with unbelievable foresight entitled "Ireland's Oppressed Fights Back." On Fublocht, which is the Irish newspaper here up north, was in turn outspoken in their support for Mumia Abu Jamal, a political prisoner in the struggle for Black liberation, asserting that we in Ireland have had too much experiences of corrupt legal systems in the past to watch quietly from the sidelines as Abu Jamal goes to his death. There were many people in Ireland, the North and Dublin that were hung for defending their own civil rights. It is no surprise that the Irish Catholic communities were so quick to express solidarity with other political prisoners given their long history of imprisonment at the hands of the British state. For centuries, Irish prisoners of war had resisted incarnation and in various ways. Terence McSweeney hunger strike in the 1920s was known to have figures including Ho Chi Minh and Marcus Garvey. It was this long-held tradition of hunger striking that political prisoners seized upon during the Troubles to gain support for the movement. The Troubles is an Irish term and a UK term to refer to what happened in Northern Ireland. So that's what we call it, the Troubles. Completely minimize it, but that's what we call it. Whilst multiple hunger strikers were held during the war, in 1981, hunger strike stands out as the most notable and devastating, with hunger strikers dying by their deaths. They were led to their death by British governmental contempt. They were labelled as terrorists. Their lives didn't matter. It didn't matter if they starved to death. It didn't matter what their cause was. They weren't even seen as people. To this day, Irish Republican reverence of prisoners is expressed in the commemorative ceremonies and murals plastered across all the walls. And you'll see that really commonly up the north, in many counties up the north, but especially Belfast or Derry. And as I stated earlier, there was a march done from Belfast to Derry in protest for civil rights for Catholics. And they had sang the gospel song all the way there. Heavily influenced. This solidarity was with Republican prisoners. It extended beyond just vocal from the outside. So prison breaks were a key feature for the Irish and anti-colonial. For the anti-colonial struggle. On one occasion, an IRA member hijacked a helicopter and soared into the D wing of Mountjoy prison. For people who are not sure, that is somebody that went from the north to the capital of Ireland, Mountjoy prison, Dublin. They picked up 3 IRA prisoners, flying off brief for 3 days of freedom. During that infamous 1983 Maze prison escape, 38 IRA prisoners elaborate a plan, including smuggling in guns, dressing as prison officers, and hijacking a food truck to escape. This was not without hitches. Many escapes were captured, whilst others were returned to the IRA active service or lived on the run, many going to America. One man, Jerry Friars, had never been traced since. To this day, he's on the run. While the Troubles were largely contained to the 6 counties, Irish communities in Britain were also under constant surveillance. This over-policing led to the famous cases of the Birmingham 6, Maguire 7, the Guildford 4, where Irish people were convicted of terror offences based on their nationality and fabricated evidence despite their innocence. Abolition doesn't differentiate between guilt and innocence. While thinking about the humanity of those incarcerated, but these blatant injustices further entrenched Irish communities already existing in mistrust and security forces. A lot of people, there's things like Bloody Sunday up north. There's a song by U2, Bloody Sunday, which kind of brings it up. It's infamous here. You will see old pictures here of a priest waving a white flag while the British Army opened up on the public there. A lot of people after that event joined the IRA. A lot of people. Just because it is the injustice that was being done to Catholics. Willingly went in and advocated to be part of it, for that movement, for their civil rights. When the war was brought to a close by the fragile peace talks, and they were really fragile, enshrined in the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, one of the agreements led to the release of 500 prisoners convicted of violent offences. Society did not erupt into chaos despite the uncertain post-conflict landscape. It's not that an obvious endorsement of free them all. What is? The war against British occupation in Ireland was characterised by pain and struggling. But the forging of community abolition provides seeds of hope for those of us fighting against the Kerry state years later. Irish Republicans cannot afford to lose sight of our radical tradition. In Bobby Sands' own words, people of Ireland dwell well on these lines. If you knew what the torture that the prisoners know well, you'd storm these dungeons, you'd tear down this hell. No one is more aware of the violence of policing and prisons that oppress communities across the world. And no one is more imaginative in their resistance. It's time we learned from their example. Let's liberate our communities, like Bogside residents liberated Derry. Here's to an abolitionist united Ireland and a free Derry world. Roisin Spillane is a freelance writer and activist based in London, and she focused on the abolition of the psychiatric industrial complex, and I will quote them on my community wall. So that was her influence. Let me play this. Let me see. Good for. I don't think that. Let me read you something about black and green, and this is referring to the Panthers and the IRA, okay? Black Panthers and the IRA. The historic connection between Black American civil rights activists and the Irish nationalists. On October 5th, 1968, the Northern Ireland civil rights movement burst onto the international scene with televised pictures showing marches being battened off the streets of Derry by police. Non-violent protests against discrimination had been prelocating for years, but it was the small march in Derry that really launched the movement. When films showed the police using water cannons against their marchers, commentators and all over the world compared the scene to the Black civil rights marches in the US, an identification the marchers themselves were keen to encourage. Like the Black American activists, they demanded to end their gerrymandering, fair housing, distribution, and one man, one vote, and sang "We Shall Overcome" at rallies, stints, and marches across Northern Ireland. So they adapted that directly and paid respects by singing their gospel song, "We Shall Overcome," while marching through different counties. They call themselves Ulster, well, I'm not going to say that, and drew on the historic connections between Black American civil rights activists and Irish nationalists. The links went back for several centuries in the mid-1600s. Oliver Cromwell, English army, invaded Ireland and banished many Irish to become slaves in the mid-West Indies, where some worked side by side with Black slaves in the Caribbean, in the sugarcane fields. And in Bermuda in 1661, Barbados in 1661 and Barbados in 1668, the Irish on the islands were suspected of collaborating with Black slaves in planning insurrection against the British authorities. The small Caribbean island of Montserrat became particularly closely identified with Ireland. And in 1780, a book recorded that the vast majority of inhabitants were either descendants of the original Irish settlers or natives of Ireland, so that the use of the Irish language is preserved on the island among the people there, including the black slaves that were initially sent out there. Here's a little less known fact for people. Ties were strengthened in the mid-19th century when Daniel O'Connell, another predominant Irish person, Cromwell was a bastard, yeah, an absolute bastard control. Ties were strengthened in the mid-19th century when Daniel O'Connell publicly condemned American slavery here. He was a political figure here. In 1845, former slave Frederick Douglass toured Ireland to rouse support for the campaign to abolish slavery in America, and appeared with O'Connell at a political rally in Dublin's Liberty Hall. Douglass witnessed the destitute of many Irish peasants. His visit coincided with the first year of famine, and was struck by the similarities to the southern slaves. After addressing a huge meeting at Cork, Douglass wrote, "Never did human faces tell a sadder tale. More than 5,000 were assembled. These people lacked only a black skin to complete their likeness to the plantations that were initially sent out by Cromwell. The open, uneducated mouth, the long, gaunt arm, the badly formed foot and ankle, the shuffling gait, they reminded me of the plantation and my own cruelty abused people." Now, I just want to say something here. The Irish indented slaves were not treated as bad as the black slaves that were there. They weren't. So again, I'm not looking to offend people. I'm not looking to diminish, minimize, or disrespect. I literally just want to bring awareness on where the advocacy part comes from, what the similarities are, what the struggles, how the struggles have been similar in some degrees. That's all. And I hope I'm not offending anybody by this, because I don't actually, it's my last intent. So throughout Douglass's rise to the top levels of the US government, eventually becoming minister for Haiti, Maggie, he vigorously championed Irish independence, calling for an end to British rule, and hosting receptions in Washington, D.C. for visiting Irish MPs. The Black American-Irish connection was strengthened in the early years of this century by Marcus Garvey, the political grandfather of Black nationalism, who modelled the organisation of his Universal Improvement Association on the structure of Sinn Féin. Isn't that something? They kind of adapted different parts. At the month of the UNIA rally at Madison Square Garden in August 1920, Garvey telegrammed Eamon de Valera. He was a president here, controversial one, but he was a president here, in the name of 25,000 black delegates to formally recognise him as president of the Irish Republic. And that same year, Garvey sent repeated messages of support to the IRA hunger strikers like Terence McSweeney and Bobby Sands. By the early 1960s, the Black American struggle was again providing inspiration and support for Irish activists. The fledgling anti-discrimination movements in Northern Ireland repeated the sit-in and marching tactics of Martin Luther King and borrowed some of their radical strategies of Black student organisations. Northern Ireland civil rights leaders like Michael Farrell carefully studied the Black American movement, and in the tense months followed the Derry March on the 5th of October 1968, it deliberately copied its methods of exposing government violence. So the civil rights movement in America was essentially the template for the Irish people here. It was a template, and they were allies. Far less prominent in people's democracy, the student movement had sprung around in Queen's University in Belfast. In the days after the Derry March, he led a civil rights march from Belfast to Derry, carefully modelled on the Black Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. The Selma and Montgomery March forced from federal government to intervene in Alabama. The local law enforcement agency was completely biased against blacks, and you could not achieve any sort of justice within the legal institution or political structures within Alabama. So they staged a dramatic march across Alabama, which was attacked by white racists. The Belfast Derry March turned out to be no less dramatic. The young protesters sang "On to Selma" as they walked. In conscious imitation of the Black American marchers, they were violently attacked by hundreds of counter-demonstrators at Bernadette, and like in Alabama, the local police refused to protect the civil rights demonstrators. The police inaction in Bumtalent made comparisons with Alabama all the more obvious and undermined the credibility of the Northern Ireland government, precisely the result of Farrell had been hoping for. Links between the student protesters in Northern Ireland and the radical elements of the American movement were cemented later that year when Ellis McDermott of People Democracy visited Black Panther headquarters in New York and made an honorary Panther. 1969 also saw Bernadette Devlin first visit the US, spirited out of Derry as British troops arrived to end the Battle of the Bogside. That's what we just covered. She gave an eyewitness account of the fighting between the police and Catholic residents and to raise money for the civil rights and effort in Northern Ireland. She was a 22-year-old student, an advocate. She was sent to prison. She fought back. She didn't lose her voice, and she stayed steady and stoic to her cause. Democracy had been elected to the British Parliament and the Mid-Ulster constituency in April 1965 on a civil rights platform. An undeniable, articulate and engaging personality, Devlin became an instant hit with the US media. She appeared on major TV shows across the country and won a worldwide audience for the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Campaign that all previously visiting spokespeople combined. Apart from speaking on the usual round of Irish American clubs and political meetings, Devlin also visited Operation Bootstrap in what's the Black District of Los Angeles, torn apart by riots a few years earlier. Devlin distributed many of her Irish American hosts by pointedly reminding them that if they supported civil rights in Ireland, they should support them in the US civil rights also. 4 days into the trip, she astonished an Irish-American rally in Philadelphia, where she sang and even danced with a black man and asked him to sing "We Shall Overcome." When presented with the keys of New York City by Mayor John Lindsay, she promptly had them turned over to a local Black Panther party. And as a gesture of support for their efforts, her vocally criticism of Chicago Mayor Richard Daley's handling of the left protests of the Democratic Convention, which happened on the previous summer. She was alarmed that many Irish Americans and her popularity in conservative circles rapidly dwindled. For speaking up. Those who were supposed to be peoples in the Irish Americans who knew about English misrule and the famine and supported the civil rights movement at home looked to be sounded like me and like Orange Men. So the Orange Men would be the equivalent of the UVF. Her argument, and she was she was ahead of her time, inspirational woman. For the people that left Ireland and were now established in America, She basically called them out for not supporting the civil rights in America. She specifically drew alliances on how the oppression that they flew from and went to another country were idly standing by and not speaking up. They said exactly the same things about blacks that the loyalists said about us at home. That's how she addressed them. In Detroit, she admonished Irish Americans for refusing to stand shoulder to shoulder with their fellow Black Americans, and the trip ended in confusion when Devlin became increasingly suspicious that the funds she was raising were to be used to buy guns, and had specifically told audiences that she did not want the money for guns. But she had overheard an organizer of her trip suggesting that the dollars might be diverted for arms anyway. Devlin cut short her trip, refusing to go to Boston or Washington, D.C. to ask people for money when she could not guarantee how it might be spent. Integrity. She returned to the US in February 1971, and the conservative Irish Americans who now stay away from her appearances were being replaced by Black Americans. As word spread of her interest in the civil rights struggle in the US, during the trip, she met predominant radical Black leaders like Huey P. Newton and Stockley Carmichael. And despite strenuous objections from the local Irish American community in San Francisco, she even visited Angela Davis in prison. Davis had been on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. She'd been publicly identified by the President Richard Nixon as a terrorist. And she was awaiting trial for murder and kidnapping. When Devlin visited her, Angela Davis and I are involved in the same struggle. You can see the similarities. For the liberation of our own people. And after that visit, Davis was acquitted of all charges. Devlin confronted the Irish Americans with the ambiguity of supporting civil rights on one side of the Atlantic and not on the other. Daniel O'Connell had done the same thing centuries before over here, when he unsuccessfully urged Irish Americans to join the anti-slavery movement in America. Both O'Connell and Devlin saw their political and financial support in America collapse when they attacked Irish Americans for not supporting civil rights for Black Americans. People going along to get along. People who knew what oppression was. She was able to be a voice to do the right thing, even against her own people. O'Connell was attacked by the Tyrone-based Archbishop of New York. Judge Hugh for his opposition to slavery. He condemned by Irish American newspapers like the Boston Pilot. He was cut off from donations from various repeal associations across the country. The repeal associations had funded O'Connell's efforts to have British act under Union appeal. But his call for Irish Americans to join the abolitionist movement caused disarray in the network of repeal associates, and those in Charlestown and Natchez broke up in protest of O'Connell's anti-slavery position. Relations between the Irish Americans and Blacks have been complicated, and at times even violent. In the mid-1800s, newly arrived Irish immigrants often competed with free Black Americans for jobs. And there are two groups shared a small social status. American employers in the middle of the 19th century often had their pick of Irish or Black labor. In the study of American slave system in the 1850s, Frederick Law Olmsted recorded that some preferred Irish workers, others Black. One Virginia landowner claimed Irish workers would perform other 50% of work than Black slaves. Another tobacco farmer from the same state explained to Olmsted that they employed Irish labourers over Blacks, not because they were more productive, but because he thought the Black slaves were less of a person. So when I say they were indented, I really mean there is a difference. There's a huge difference between how they were treated. Olmsted stated that if one of the black slaves' life was too valuable to be risked, and if they died, it was a considerable loss. He was told whatever their relative merits, blacks and Irish workers were commonly regarded as compromising the lowest social state of America's society. And an English historian visiting the US wrote in 1881, this would be a grand land if only every Irishman would kill a black slave. That's horrendous. The sentiment gently approved, sometimes with the qualification that they want Irish and black slaves for servants, not being able to get any others there. And this is to do with the Caribbean, when they were sent out to the Caribbean. What's great, and Temper touched on this last night, and I think it's fantastic. It is fantastic. In Jamaica and other countries in the Caribbean, we've all racists. They just see themselves as, they're all who they are. I don't want to oversaturate people with articles. I will put them on my community wall for anybody that wants to see them. It is horrific control, yeah, horrific shit. If anybody wants to read the full articles, you're welcome. These are historical documents. New York's first black mayor, David Dinkins, addressed a meeting in the city protesting Roisin's treatment. Still radical Angela Davis. Imagine he protesting against advocating and calling out for civil rights of how people should be treated. So when things are ignorantly stated out here, like go back to Ireland, you have no clue. There are similarities, there are overlaps of history. I'm by no means stating that I am aware of the experience and lived experience that the American black people have had or continue to have. Because if you compare the two, there has been some progress here. And people are still battling in America for their civil rights, to be seen equally, even down to employment, housing, everything. The stereotypes across between Catholics and the civil rights movement within America were quite similar. So when people wonder why I like speaking, or maybe I don't like that, I actually don't like going into the history, because I'm very aware in Ireland and with Britain, I have people from the UK as subscribers, and I'm sure that they have family who were affected by the IRA also. So I'm not saying it's been good on either side. It is just the political aspect of things. It is not as simple as it's the UK. But we would not have the proclamation of Ireland that we have. And we would not have the Good Friday Agreement with the ceasefire that's here in this country without the alliance and the structure of the Black Panther Party. Highly influential. So although I may not have lived it, I can, in a small degree, empathize, relate, and understand how some of the oppression and imperialism and belittling affects a community of people systematically. Very difficult topic, Nick. History, I said British armed borders. They were only abolished here in 2025. Yeah, those hard borders that I mentioned earlier, they were only abolished in 2025, and that was only because the UK left the EU. The history is still very recent. It's extremely recent, yeah. Has made progress and would not have made the progress that it had without these influences. So yeah, not all people are trying to take over. Some people try and understand. I don't like when people say, go back to your own country. Mind your business. Don't be over. What are you doing in these spaces? What are you doing over here? I think there's a difference between going into a space, being respectful, minding your business in relation to the politics that go on between that community, and inserting myself in that. I do not do that. But if there's a topic that I feel aligns with my principles on children, on certain topics, I do speak up. I do not make that about race. I make that about people. And in regards to, let me just say AT2's live, for example, I know there's a lot of kickback about somebody who went up and gave their opinion. I can see where she's coming from on that. I can understand why she has that viewpoint on some things. Not everybody that's European is racist or covert racist. And it's sad that that is how people perceive it. I'm not saying that any white person should go into the black tea sector and make any kind of noise or grievance or set people against each other. No, that's not appropriate. You should be kicked out for that shit. If you don't respect where you are, you should be kicked out. I try my best not to. Like I said, yes, I do speak up on certain issues. That's not about race. Outside of that, I mind my business. I align and I'm an ally to certain people. And that's it. And then you have others who are speaking about unity while using terms that are extremely segregating. But then I have to remember, when you've people that are going on the platform stating this is the black tea sector, they can go anywhere. She is right. It is the black tea sector. And if you're in there talking about them, grifting off them, and using that as your content, I see that as kind of exploiting for your own gain, like blackfishing. That's how I see it. That's my opinion. And also then you've got other people who are white American, white European, who have made comments that are racial. So when people get to the point that they're exasperated and say they're all the same, I can kind of understand where that comes from. I'm not here to change anybody's opinion. I'm not here to challenge anybody's opinion. I'm simply putting this out there as that there are similarities. So yes, I do believe there can be alliances, 100%. But those alliances are just that. They're alliances. They're not coming in and taking over. They are not coming in and dictating to people what they can and cannot do. And that's it. I hope I've done this justice. Again, disclaimer, I am not trying to minimize or offend or play down any of the struggles that people have lived or experienced firsthand in another country. I'm trying, if anything, my hope for this live is just to kind of bring awareness, and that's it. Bring awareness to the similarities in some cases, not all, not all. But I think even for people to realize the Black Panther movement has a huge part in our proclamation of independence, and especially the ceasefire up north. And that's kind of it. I don't want to oversaturate. I just wanted to touch on some things that I think are extremely relevant and prevalent to where we are today. So, yeah, I did spend a lot of time reading the chat, so let me just go back over some of the comments before I wrap it up. And I realize this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, so that's okay. Má go suú sem an léir teachtal na cinálscintí agus an éisteach leis an trúla pasisiúnta seo. What have you just spoken on, Snoopy, explains a lot about you and why you speak out on certain things on racism. I hope so, Nick. That was kind of like what I was hoping to do. Especially when you have people stating like, you're no advocate. You cannot be an advocate. You cannot be an advocate. Why not? I'm not over here trying to take over anything. I mind my business. You won't see me drag somebody in the black tea sector, even if I'm sitting in a chat where they're being dragged. I mind my business. And there's an ally. I like certain people for certain reasons. I've said this many, many times, and it's the best reference I can come up with. When I go visit my friend's house, I don't go rearranging their furniture. And that's it. But absolutely, there are some of us out here, European, who are not racial, not racist, not in that way at all. But again, I'm not here to change anybody's opinion. Maybe just to give a different perspective. That's all. I was told as a child about the Irish. They were indentive slaves. They were different from the black slaves. And I think that is a misconception. And then that does get said a lot of time. I'm not talking about you, do, because somebody else used that term to get out of something and talk about Irish slaves. They were very different. In a lot of ways, they were treated differently. They weren't treated as bad. Give an education and perspective, Plotter. Yeah. And this will be for some people, and some people won't. But it's something different. And also something I think is current and what we see playing out here all the time. So that's it. That's what I have for now. I hope somebody got something from it, and if not, that's okay too. And again, I really hope I didn't offend anybody from America. Specifically, I'm in the black community, the African American black community. I hope I didn't come across insensitive or didn't, like I said, diminish, minimize, or glaze over any of the main points and where they suffered also, and continue to. Like Northern Ireland has come a long way in comparison. Still plays out politically, still plays out the judicial system. There's that in common too. 3 children were free, and they usually were free after 30 years. Yeah. And I'm actually beginning as I was taking care of something. No problem. Thank you, Judo. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming in. I really appreciate you coming in. I actually had more people in the chat than I was expecting. I was hoping for maybe 5. I was hoping for 5 people to come in, just with the topic. I don't like doing political stuff. It's not my forte. I'm simply trying to just explain the dynamics of and the historical aspects of Ireland. So thank you for giving me your time, and thank you for staying and engaging. I appreciate you all. The people deserve to know, Temper. Exactly. I do consider myself an advocate for people. All people, all ethnicities, a voice for people. That's it. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Oh, by the way, one last thing. Temper did a live last night and I shared it on my community wall. Please go watch it. Please go watch it. There were some things debunked and receipts and truth. Yeah, it's on my community wall. Check that out if you get time. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.